At Christmas dinner, my cousin stood up, raised her glass, and said, "Let's toast to her." The family disappointment. Laughter exploded around the table like fireworks. I sat there frozen, my heart sinking into my stomach. My mother gave a tight smile, trying to pretend she didn't hear it. My father cleared his throat and looked away. My uncle slapped the table, laughing so hard his face turned red. My grandmother chuckled without really knowing why. I sat perfectly still, gripping the edge of my chair, trying to swallow the lump rising in my throat. I told myself not to cry. Not here, not in front of them. Then, just as she lowered her glass and people returned to their conversations, there was a loud knock at the door. Everyone turned, confused. Who would be delivering something on Christmas night? My father grumbled about teenagers playing pranks, and my uncle joked, maybe it was Santa bringing her a participation trophy. I stood up slowly. The room seemed to buzz with laughter and low conversation. I opened the door, and there he was, the mailman, bundled up in a thick jacket, his cheeks red from the cold. In his hand was a large envelope with my name written neatly across the front. He smiled warmly and said, "Congratulations. You're officially a millionaire." Behind me, the laughter stopped so sharply it was like someone had yanked the cord out of a radio. I turned back toward the room, clutching the envelope to my chest. Every face at the table was frozen in stunned silence. Plates sat half-eaten. Glasses were mid-air. Nobody said a word. For the first time that night, I smiled. The house smelled like cinnamon, roasted ham, and fresh pine. Strings of colorful lights blinked in the windows, and a fire crackled in the big stone fireplace. My mother had gone all out, as she did every year, hanging garlands across the stair railings, lighting vanilla-scented candles in every corner, setting the big oak dining table with her best china and embroidered napkins. It looked perfect, like something out of a Christmas magazine. It was the kind of scene people posted online to prove their lives were together. But beneath the glitter and the glow, there was tension so thick it could have choked you. I sat at the far end of the table, 2 seats away from my cousin, watching her laugh at something my uncle had said. She tossed her shiny hair over her shoulder and smiled the way she always did when she knew all the attention was on her. Her parents beamed at her from across the table, pride practically radiating from them. She had just been promoted to senior marketing director at a major firm in the city. She wore success like a designer jacket, perfectly tailored and impossible to ignore. Across from me, my mother kept glancing over, offering tight, encouraging smiles like she could sense I was slipping deeper into my chair. My father sat beside her, methodically carving his ham, occasionally grunting responses to whatever conversation floated his way. He was a man of few words, but his silences spoke volumes. Disappointment was an uninvited guest that had been lingering over our relationship for the past 2 years. 2 years ago, I had dropped out of graduate school to launch a tech startup. I believed in it with everything I had. I poured my savings, my energy, my pride into it, and it failed. Not in a spectacular, headline-making way. It failed quietly, like a light slowly dimming until one day it just went out. Investors pulled out. Bills piled up. I moved back home to regroup. And every day since, I had felt the quiet weight of what everyone thought but never said. She had so much potential. What a shame. I picked at the green beans on my plate, forcing myself to keep my head high, to smile when necessary, to pretend I was part of the celebration. But the truth was, I didn't feel like I belonged at that table anymore. I was a reminder of everything they feared for their own children. A cautionary tale in real time. My grandmother sat at the head of the table, humming along to a Bing Crosby record playing softly in the background. She'd always been kind to me, but even her warm glances tonight felt dipped in pity. I wondered if somewhere deep down she thought the same thing everyone else did. Maybe she just wasn't made for success. As the wine flowed and the conversations grew louder, my cousin's stories became more elaborate. Her vacations, her awards, the bonus she was getting this year. She was magnetic in a way I could never fake, commanding the room effortlessly. When she laughed, people leaned in. When I spoke, it felt like the sound of silverware scraping across plates. I sipped my water and stared at the centerpiece, a giant arrangement of poinsettias and gold-painted pine cones, trying to will the night to end. I thought about sneaking out early, making some excuse about being tired, but I could already hear my mother's voice in my head. Stay. Show them you're fine. Be strong. So I stayed, twisting my cloth napkin under the table until my fingers ached. My uncle clapped his hands once to get everyone's attention, grinning like he had a secret to share. My cousin rose to her feet, champagne flute in hand, flashing that picture-perfect smile that never reached her eyes when she looked at me. My stomach twisted in a way I knew too well. Something was coming. Before she even spoke, I could feel it. The weight of every unfinished dream, every failed attempt, every whispered conversation when they thought I wasn't listening, they had all built up to this moment. I braced myself, setting my fork down carefully on the tablecloth, willing myself not to react no matter what she said. I didn't know yet that a simple knock at the door was about to change everything. I only knew that for as long as I could remember, Christmas had been a time for hope, and this year, I had brought none of it with me. She tapped her glass with a butter knife, sending a sharp, clear ring through the room. The conversation stopped. Heads turned. Every pair of eyes seemed to land on her like spotlights, and for a moment, it felt like the air in the room thinned. She held her glass high, her voice light and dripping with that sugary sweetness she used when she wanted to make something cruel sound charming. "I just think we should take a moment," she said, smiling broadly, "to appreciate how far we've all come this year. Promotions, new homes, new milestones. It's been a year of winning." My chest tightened. I stared straight ahead, pretending to be fascinated by the pattern in the tablecloth. "And, of course," she continued, "no family gathering would be complete without mentioning the real MVP, the one who reminds us all that no matter how bad things get, we're doing just fine." There was a ripple of laughter, the kind that people let out when they are not sure if they are supposed to find something funny but laugh anyway because everyone else is. Her eyes locked on me. Her grin widened, sharp as a blade. "Let's raise a glass," she said brightly, to her. The family disappointment. The words hit harder than I expected. There was a beat of stunned silence, like the room was holding its breath. And then, a wave of laughter rolled across the table, full-throated, mean-spirited, unchecked. I felt my face burn. My hands clenched into fists under the table. My mother gave a weak, awkward laugh, her eyes darting to me with a look that said, "Please don't make a scene." My father stared at his plate like he wished he could disappear into it. Uncle Mark laughed so hard he wiped tears from his eyes. Grandma smiled vaguely, probably not even fully hearing what was said, but laughing along anyway. The world blurred at the edges. It was not just her words that stung. It was the way no one stood up. No one said anything, not even the people who were supposed to protect me. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to vanish right there into the floorboards. 1,000 memories flooded my mind at once. Every risk I had taken. Every night I had stayed up working until my eyes burned. Every humiliating phone call from creditors. Every time I told myself to keep believing, even when it felt like no one else did. I thought about the quiet mornings when I packed up the remnants of my dream, selling off what little equipment I had left, boxing up plans no one would ever see. And now, I was a punchline at my own family's dinner table. She sat down again, still smirking, pleased with herself. Conversations picked back up around the table, lighter now, like a release valve had been opened. The tension I had felt all night evaporated, replaced with a kind of cruel energy that left me hollow inside. I pushed my chair back slowly, the scrape of the legs against the wood floor louder than I intended. Heads turned again. I forced a smile onto my face, the kind that did not reach my eyes. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I slipped out of the dining room and into the hallway, my breath coming faster now. I leaned against the wall, pressing my forehead against the cool plaster. I blinked hard, refusing to cry. Not here. Not where they could see. I had already given them enough tonight. Behind me, I heard Uncle Mark's booming laugh carry through the doorway. "Maybe the mailman's here to deliver her participation ribbon," he roared, and fresh laughter erupted. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the burning behind them to stop. And then there was a knock, a hard, urgent knock at the door. For a second, I thought I imagined it, but it came again, louder this time. Conversations paused. Chairs scraped against the floor. Someone muttered something about Christmas pranks. My father grumbled under his breath. I turned toward the door, confused. Nobody delivers mail on Christmas night. The knock came a third time, sharp and insistent. I looked back into the dining room. Everyone else stayed seated, craning their necks to see. No one made a move to get up. It was up to me. Squaring my shoulders, I walked to the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. I had no idea what was waiting on the other side. At that moment, it didn't matter. Anything at all, was better than the weight of that room pressing down on me. I reached for the doorknob, heart hammering in my chest, and pulled it open. The cold rushed in the moment I opened the door. The snow was falling in thick, heavy flakes, the streetlights casting a soft glow across the driveway. Standing there, bundled in a thick navy jacket with the postal logo stitched over the chest, was a man holding a large, official-looking envelope. His nose and cheeks were red from the cold, but he smiled at me like he had been waiting for this moment all night. "Helene?" he asked, shifting the envelope in his gloved hands. "Yes," I said, my voice coming out sharper than I meant. I cleared my throat and tried again. "That's me." He grinned, pulling a clipboard from under his arm. "Signature, please," he said, "and congratulations. You're officially a millionaire." For a moment, I just stood there, staring at him, convinced I had misheard. A millionaire? Me? It felt like a cruel joke. I looked over my shoulder, half expecting to see her peeking around the corner, laughing, waiting to humiliate me one last time. But the hallway was empty, the laughter from the dining room muted and distant. The mailman gave a little chuckle and held out the clipboard again, patient and unbothered by my hesitation. I took the pen from his hand and scrolled my name, my fingers trembling. He handed me the envelope, nodded warmly, and turned to leave, crunching down the snowy walkway without another word. I closed the door quietly behind him and stood there, clutching the envelope to my chest. My heart pounded so hard it was almost painful. I could still hear the family in the dining room, laughing, eating, completely unaware that something had shifted, something massive and irreversible. I slid my finger under the sealed flap and tore it open. Inside was a heavy stack of documents, all bearing the bold letterhead of the American Young Innovators Foundation. I scanned the first page, the words swimming slightly as I read. "Congratulations. You have been selected as the grand prize recipient of the AYF Resilience Grant for Entrepreneurship in the amount of $2 million. It was real. It was real, and it was mine. I remembered applying almost a year ago. I had been sitting in a tiny coffee shop, desperate and exhausted, filling out application after application for every grant and competition I could find. I never expected to hear back. I had almost forgotten about it, completely convinced by months of silence that I had lost. But I had not lost. I had won. I pressed the papers to my chest and closed my eyes, letting the truth sink in. I was not the family disappointment. I was not a failure. I had built something once. And even though it had fallen apart, someone had seen the fight it took to get back up again. Someone believed in me. Someone had seen my worth, even when the people sitting at that table had not. The old version of me, the one who spent years seeking approval from people who measured success by titles and paychecks, would have rushed back into that dining room, waving the envelope around, demanding respect, rubbing it in their faces. But I was not that girl anymore. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hands down the front of my dress, and stepped back into the hallway. The laughter quieted when they saw me. My mother looked up first, her smile faltering. My father raised an eyebrow. She leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass, her smirk already returning. I walked calmly toward the table, the envelope tucked securely under my arm. No one said a word. I pulled out my chair and sat down again, lifting my fork like nothing had happened. I sliced a piece of ham, chewing slowly, savoring the taste. She narrowed her eyes. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice falsely light. I wiped my mouth with my napkin and met her gaze squarely. "The mailman," I said. "He brought me some good news." The table went still. No one breathed. Even Grandma looked up from her peas, sensing the change in the air. I could have explained everything right then. I could have detailed the grant, the money, the validation. I could have thrown it in their faces, weaponized it the way they had weaponized my failures. Instead, I smiled, took another bite of my ham, and said nothing more. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the space their cruelty had created. I no longer needed their approval. I had outgrown their smallness without even realizing it. That was the real victory. I ate my dinner in silence, feeling the weight of the unopened conversation hanging heavy around the table. I could feel their curiosity prickling against me like static. Every so often, I caught someone sneaking a glance in my direction, their eyes darting away the moment I looked up. The envelope sat neatly by my plate, presence louder than any of the voices around me. She could not take it anymore. She leaned forward, her manicured fingers tapping against her glass in a quick, nervous rhythm. So, she said, forcing a bright laugh. What was the good news? Did you win the lottery or something? The way she said it, sharp and dismissive, made it clear she did not believe for a second that anything good could possibly happen for me. Around the table, a few others chuckled awkwardly, waiting to see what joke would come next at my expense. I set down my fork, carefully wiped my hands on my napkin, and picked up the envelope. Something like that, I said calmly. I slid the first page out from the stack of documents and laid it flat on the table where everyone could see. The bold print at the top gleamed under the chandelier's soft light. Congratulations. You have been selected as the grand prize recipient of the AIF Resilience Grant for Entrepreneurship in the amount of $2 million. There was a long, stretching silence. No one moved. No one spoke. My mother blinked rapidly, her hand coming up to cover her mouth. My father set down his knife and fork with a clatter. Uncle Mark stopped mid-bite, the fork full of mashed potatoes trembling in his hand. Even she, who usually had a quick comeback for everything, was frozen. Her eyes darted back and forth across the page, as if reading it over and over would somehow change the words. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might laugh it off, make some snide comment, but the words never came. She just sat there, her mouth slightly open, her confidence crumbling in real time. Grandma, bless her, squinted at the paper and then turned to me with a broad, toothy smile. Well, would you look at that, she said. Our girl's a millionaire. Still no one else spoke. I could feel the emotions crashing over them. Shock, disbelief, confusion, maybe even guilt. I watched it all play out across their faces, the slow dawning realization that the girl they had laughed at, belittled, and dismissed had accomplished something none of them ever had, something they probably never would. It felt like justice. It felt like freedom. She finally found her voice, but it cracked when she spoke. Is this real? She asked, her words thin and shaky. I smiled, not smugly, but with something deeper, something stronger, a peace that came from knowing I no longer needed anything from them. Not their approval, not their praise, not even their understanding. It is, I said. They saw something in me worth investing in. I left it at that. No need to explain the hours of work, the endless setbacks, the nights I had almost given up. If they could not see it now, they never would. My mother reached across the table and took my hand in hers, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. I am so proud of you, she whispered, her voice breaking. My father cleared his throat and nodded, his face serious but proud. The others fumbled for words, offering stammered congratulations, but the energy in the room had shifted permanently. I was no longer the family disappointment. I was something they could not quite define, something that unsettled the comfortable stories they had told about me for so long. I folded the paper neatly and slid it back into the envelope. I finished my dinner without rushing, savoring each bite, each moment of quiet power. When dessert was brought out, I rose from my chair and held up my glass. I think, I said, my voice clear and steady, this round is on me. They raised their glasses, some enthusiastically, some still trying to catch up to the reality they were now living in. As I sipped my wine, I felt a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the alcohol. It was the warmth of finally knowing who I was, not because of what they thought, but in spite of it. I had never needed their permission to succeed. I had only needed to believe that I was worthy of it. And I always had been. The night ended differently than it began. After dessert, people drifted into smaller conversations, quieter now, more cautious. The loud, easy laughter that had filled the house hours earlier had been replaced by something else, something more fragile. I moved through the living room, gathering stray plates and glasses, feeling the weight of their new silence settle into every corner. I was no longer invisible. I was something they could not easily define or dismiss anymore, and they did not quite know what to do with that. My mother followed me into the kitchen, carrying a half-empty tray of cookies. She set it down on the counter and turned to me, her hands wringing the dish towel she had grabbed without realizing. I'm sorry, she said softly, for before, letting them say those things. You deserved better from me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman who had always wanted to protect me but had not always known how. I nodded, accepting the apology without making her say more. Some things do not need to be dragged out to be real. My father came in next, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. You did good, kiddo, he said, his voice rough with emotion he rarely showed. Proud of you. It was simple, but it meant more than 1,000 apologies would have. After the dishes were done and the leftovers packed away, I stepped outside for some air. The snow was still falling, blanketing the world in soft white. The cold bit at my skin, but I welcomed it. I needed to feel something real, something solid beneath my feet. I stood on the porch, looking out over the quiet street, and thought about everything that had led me to this moment. The late nights filled with doubt. The early mornings when giving up seemed easier than trying again. The people who had believed in me when I barely believed in myself. I thought about how easy it would have been to let their laughter define me, to let their words bury me. But I had not. I had kept going, even when it felt like I was running on empty, even when it seemed like no one else was watching. The truth is, the world will always have people who are quicker to judge than to understand. There will always be people who measure your worth by your mistakes rather than your efforts. If you let them write your story for you, they will always cast you as the failure. That night, standing under the falling snow, I realized something important. I had not needed a grant to prove my value. The money was a gift, a recognition of my resilience. The real victory had happened long before that envelope arrived. It happened the first time I stood back up after falling. It happened every time I chose to keep building, even when no one was cheering for me. Success is not about proving people wrong. It is about proving yourself right. It is about refusing to let anyone else's small vision limit your potential. It is about holding on to your dreams so fiercely that not even failure can pry them from your hands. When I walked back inside, the house felt different. Or maybe it was me who had changed. She barely looked at me when I passed her. Her confidence had cracked, but I did not feel the satisfaction I thought I might. I just felt free. Free from needing her approval, free from chasing validation, free from the weight of their expectations. I gathered my things slowly, hugging my mother and father. Good night. As I reached the door, Grandma caught my hand, squeezing it tight. You always had it in you, she said, her voice firm and certain. You just had to see it for yourself. I smiled, real and full, feeling it all the way down to my bones. Outside, the snow crunched beneath my boots. I pulled my coat tighter around me and walked toward my car, the night cold and beautiful around me. I was not the family disappointment. I was the storm they never saw coming. And I was just getting started. Thank you for listening to my story. If it meant something to you, if it reminded you to believe in yourself even when others do not, I would love for you to be part of this community. Please take a second to like the video. It helps more than you know. Share it with someone who might need to hear this today. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment where you proved everyone wrong? I would love to hear your story. And if you want more real stories about resilience, hope, and finding your own way, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There is so much more to come. Thank you for being here. Stay strong. Stay true to yourself. I will see you in the next one.